She didn't shout. She didn't shake. She stood on my driveway like she owned the ground beneath my wife's feet and pointed the gun at her stomach. Not her face. Not the sky. Her stomach. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count. And what breaks me every time isn't the weapon. It's the smile, calm, satisfied. Like she'd waited a long time for this kind of silence. My wife couldn't move. Neither could I, because I wasn't even there. I was buying groceries, and someone I once ignored was ending our world without me. 3 years before that driveway, we were just two people in love with a house. Freshly married, still learning each other's coffee orders, carrying boxes into a neighborhood we believed would hold us gently. It was quiet, clean, the kind of street where you imagine your child learning to ride a bike. We didn't need perfect, we just needed to be safe. And for a brief, beautiful moment, we thought we had found it. Karen introduced herself with a letter, not a knock, not a wave. A printed, dated, formally worded letter about our welcome mat being non-compliant. We laughed. We actually laughed, moved the mat and forgot about it within the hour. That was our first mistake. Treating her opening move like a joke instead of a declaration. The letters kept coming. Trash bins left out 40 minutes past the permitted hour. A wind chime is described as a noise disturbance. Our porch light was deemed too bright for community standards. Each notice arrived with a fine attached, small enough to pay without argument, large enough to sting. We paid. We adjusted. We smiled when we passed her on the street because we still believed in being reasonable. Then my wife's pregnancy began to show. And something in Karen shifted. The notices doubled. The language sharpened. What had felt random suddenly felt targeted, timed, personal. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were a reminder of something she had lost or never had, and she had decided, quietly and completely, that we would pay for that. The notices stopped feeling random the week my wife started showing. That was not a coincidence. I know that now the way you know things after they've already hurt you. Clearly, completely, too late. Karen had found her angle. A pregnant woman, a stressed husband, a growing stack of fines, and a 14-day deadline looming like a sentence already decided. She cited us for occupancy violations. Our unborn child, she argued, changed the household count. She measured our grass and photographed our porch. She taped citations to our door before sunrise, timed perfectly for my wife to find them alone. Each notice was written in the same flat, bureaucratic tone. No malice on paper, pure malice in practice. That distinction was deliberate. She knew exactly how much cruelty you could hide inside correct grammar. I stopped paying, not out of stubbornness, out of necessity. The fines had multiplied faster than our nursery savings. I started reading the bylaws instead. Every page, every clause, every footnote. I sent certified letters requesting documentation. I recorded dates, times, exact wording. I attended the HOA meeting and stood up in a room full of people staring at their shoes and asked her slowly, which board had approved these rules. She tapped her pen and said she was enough. That sentence told me everything. This was never about rules. Rules require consistency, transparency, accountability. Karen had none of those. She had only the confidence of someone who had never been challenged, and the bitterness of someone who believed she never would be. The 14-day ultimatum expired in silence. She was waiting for surrender. What she didn't know was that I had spent every one of those 14 days building something she couldn't find her way out of. The baby shower was everything Karen wasn't. Warm, loud, full of people who showed up because they wanted to, not because a rulebook told them to. Our living room overflowed with laughter, half-assembled furniture, and the particular joy of people celebrating something that hasn't arrived yet but already feels like a miracle. Karen didn't come. She sent a citation instead. Unauthorized gathering, taped crookedly to our front door like a final petty signature. I folded it without reading it twice and went back inside. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without clenching my jaw. The next morning broke quietly. My wife stepped onto the porch to water her plants, moving slowly, humming, something I couldn't quite hear from inside. I remember that detail, the humming, because it was the last peaceful sound before everything changed. Karen appeared from the sidewalk like she had been waiting just out of frame. She started talking before she even reached the driveway. Fines, deadlines, disrespect, her voice climbing with each step. My wife told her to leave, warned her calmly, clearly. That was when Karen's expression changed, not to anger, to something quieter and far more dangerous. She reached into her bag and produced a gun, heavy, real. She pointed it at my wife's stomach and asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, whether pregnancy made her untouchable. My wife's hands rose without thinking. Her feet didn't move. Time didn't stop. It just became unbearably slow, each second stretching like it was deciding whether to continue. Karen wasn't shaking. That was the part that stayed with me longest, even after everything that followed. She wasn't shaking at all. Daniel saw it from across the street. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, didn't wait for permission. He walked toward our driveway with both palms raised, voice steady, asking Karen simply and calmly what was happening. That kind of courage doesn't announce itself. It just moves. Karen swung the gun toward him without breaking her sentence, still ranting about fines, about disrespect, about people like us who thought rules didn't apply to them. Daniel stepped back but didn't leave. He stayed visible. He stayed human. Sometimes that's the only weapon available, and somehow it's enough. Mrs. Helen had already dialed. Finger shaking, hose still running in her yard, she made the call while Karen paced our driveway like she was conducting a meeting. Curtains shifted up and down the street. Phones were raised. Witnesses were multiplying without Karen noticing, without Karen caring, because people drunk on their own authority rarely see the walls closing until the door is already locked. Sirens came faint at first, then fast, then everywhere. Patrol cars blocked the street. Officers moved with commands sharp enough to cut through Karen's monologue. She spun, accused, pointed, and blamed. Still performing, still convinced her position protected her. It didn't. The order came once, then twice. Metal hit concrete. Handcuffs closed. I pulled up seconds later, groceries in hand, and understood nothing for a full breath. Then I saw my wife on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her stomach, and Karen was restrained against a patrol car, still explaining herself to officers who had long stopped listening. The bags dropped before I decided to drop them. I crossed the driveway and held my wife and didn't say anything because there was nothing yet that words could reach. The charges came one by one, and I want you to hear every single one of them. Aggravated assault, criminal threats, reckless discharge of a firearm, harassment. Each count read aloud in a courtroom where Karen sat without her pen, without her clipboard, without the particular posture of someone who believes they are in charge. She looked smaller there, not because the room was large. Because accountability has a way of returning people to their actual size. The court moved with a thoroughness she had never extended to us. Jail time, years of probation, mandatory counseling, a lifetime firearm prohibition, restitution paid monthly, therapy costs, legal fees, documented damages. The judge cited pattern, danger, and deliberate abuse of a position of false authority. Every word landed like a gavel. I didn't feel triumphant sitting in that courtroom. I felt the particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something heavy for too long and has finally been allowed to set it down. Then the HOA itself collapsed. Auditors found what I had suspected for months. Forged citations, embezzled fines, intimidation documented in emails she had sent from a board account she alone controlled. The bylaws were voided. The board was dissolved. Neighbors who had stayed silent began speaking, quietly at first, then all at once. Records revealed that several fines across the entire neighborhood had been fabricated. Karen had not been governing. She had been extracting. There is a difference, and the law understands it even when communities forget. New elections were held transparently. Real neighbors, actual humans with actual stakes, took seats at the table. The fines were reviewed and reversed. The rules were rewritten with input, with fairness, with the basic understanding that authority without accountability is just intimidation wearing a lanyard. Karen's allies disappeared the way they always do, quietly, without apology, as though they had never stood beside her at all. Her paper kingdom didn't burn. It simply stopped being believed. And without belief, power is just paper. Our daughter was born on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the arrest, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and something close to relief. She was small and loud, and completely unaware of everything that had been risked for her before she even had a name. We named her something that meant strength. Not to remember what happened, but to make sure she would always know, from her very first breath, that the people who love you will not stay quiet when it matters most. The street changed after that. Slowly, the way neighborhoods do when fear is finally removed from the air. Doors opened. Kids reappeared. Neighbors who had apologized in whispers began saying hello at full volume. None of it erased what happened on that driveway, but it reminded us why we had stayed and fought instead of simply leaving. Some things are worth the cost of protecting. Karen taught us that, unintentionally, completely, and permanently. Power without humanity always collapses. It just needs one person to stop pretending otherwise. If this story reached something in you, leave a comment below. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. There is always another one worth telling.